Retirement is supposed to be the season where life finally slows down, where the pressure eases, and the years ahead feel lighter than the years behind. But for millions of people, retirement slowly becomes something else, something heavier, quieter, and more stressful than they ever expected. Not because of one big disaster, not because of a sudden crash or dramatic mistake, but because of small money decisions that felt harmless at the time, decisions that didn't feel wrong, decisions that didn't raise alarms. And that's what makes them so dangerous. These mistakes don't announce themselves. They don't show up with warning signs. They creep in quietly, year by year, until one day people find themselves asking, how did it end up like this? How did all that careful planning still lead to stress and uncertainty? If you listen to retirees long enough, if you read their stories on forums and hear their reflections, a pattern starts to emerge. The issue is rarely that they didn't work hard or didn't save at all. Most of them did everything they were told to do. The problem is that no one warned them about the quiet money mistakes, the ones that don't feel like mistakes at the time, the ones that slowly drain peace out of retirement without being noticed. This video isn't about fear. It's about awareness. It's about learning from the lived experiences of people who are already in retirement, so you don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. The first mistake begins earlier than most people realize, and it's one of the most common traps of all, underestimating how long retirement actually lasts. For many people, retirement still feels like a short chapter, maybe 10 or 15 years, something to enjoy before slowing down further. But the reality is very different. People are living longer, healthier lives, and retirement can easily stretch 25 or even 30 years. That single difference changes everything, yet many retirees plan their money as if time will politely stop. One man shared that when he retired at 65, he felt confident his savings would last comfortably for the rest of his life. He did the math, he followed the averages. What he didn't account for was how averages feel when you're living them year by year. After 10 years of retirement, he realized he was only halfway through, and his spending habits hadn't changed. His lifestyle felt reasonable, even modest, but his savings were shrinking faster than he expected. The mistake wasn't reckless spending, it was assuming tomorrow wouldn't last as long as it did. Another woman explained that she never felt old. She stayed active, social, and healthy, so she didn't adjust her financial expectations. Retirement felt like freedom, not a countdown. But her savings didn't care how young she felt. They only responded to time, and the longer time went on, the tighter things became. When you underestimate how long retirement lasts, every small expense becomes heavier. Every unexpected cost feels bigger because there's more future left to pay for. The second mistake is just as quiet and just as common, relying too heavily on fixed income without flexibility. Pensions, Social Security, annuities, these can be wonderful foundations, but they can also create a false sense of security. Many retirees feel safe knowing money arrives every month. It feels predictable, comforting, stable. But life rarely stays predictable. One retiree shared that his pension covered his basic needs, so he stopped paying close attention to the rest of his finances. At first, everything felt fine, but over time, healthcare premiums increased, property taxes rose, everyday expenses quietly climbed, but his income stayed exactly the same. It didn't grow while life kept moving forward. Another woman explained that she avoided investing altogether because she wanted safety. She preferred guaranteed income and disliked market uncertainty. What she didn't realize was that avoiding all risk created a different kind of risk. Inflation slowly eroded her purchasing power, and what once felt comfortable began to feel restrictive. The issue isn't having fixed income, it's building a retirement with no flexibility, no growth, no ability to adapt. Retirement isn't static. Needs change, priorities shift, costs rise without asking permission, and without some form of adaptable income, retirees often feel boxed in, forced to cut back later in ways they never planned for. The third mistake often comes from a place of love, helping family financially. This is one of the most emotional and least discussed retirement money traps. Retirees want to help their children, their grandchildren, sometimes even extended family. It feels right. After all, they worked hard and saved, so they want to share. One retiree shared how he helped his adult children with down payments, tuition, and occasional emergencies. None of it felt excessive because it happened over many years, but when he finally added everything together, he was shocked by how much he had given away. And unlike working income, retirement savings don't regenerate easily. Another woman admitted she never said no because she didn't want to feel selfish. Later, she realized that by not setting boundaries, she had slowly weakened her own financial security. The mistake wasn't generosity, it was unplanned generosity. Retirement money has a different job. Once it's spent, it doesn't come back, and helping others without clear limits can quietly shorten how long your money lasts. The fourth mistake hides behind comfort and routine, failing to adjust spending habits after retirement. During working years, spending patterns are supported by regular paychecks and income growth. Retirement removes that growth, but habits often stay the same. One man explained that he didn't change much after retiring. He traveled the same way, ate out just as often, and kept the same lifestyle because it felt normal. What he didn't notice was that without income growth, his spending had no cushion. Another retiree shared how small recurring expenses, subscriptions, memberships, automatic renewals stayed in place simply because they were familiar. Individually, they felt harmless, but together they created a steady drain on her finances. The danger is that these habits don't feel irresponsible, they feel comfortable. Retirement spending needs awareness, not fear. What worked at 50 may not work at 70. Small adjustments early prevent painful cuts later, yet many people delay this reflection until they're forced into it. The fifth mistake begins quietly and often feels like relief, avoiding financial conversations altogether. After decades of responsibility, many retirees feel tired of thinking about money. They want peace, not paperwork. One woman shared that after retiring, she stopped opening financial statements because they made her anxious. She assumed everything was fine because nothing felt wrong at first, but years passed and small issues went unnoticed. Fees, inefficient accounts, missed opportunities. The longer she avoided looking, the harder it felt to start again. Another retiree admitted he didn't want to face the possibility that changes were needed, so he chose avoidance instead. But retirement doesn't remove the need for financial attention. It changes its nature. Avoiding money doesn't create peace. It delays discomfort until it becomes unavoidable. The common thread in all these mistakes is silence. They don't arrive with warnings. They grow slowly, politely, quietly, until one day the consequences feel loud and overwhelming. But awareness changes everything. Recognizing these patterns early gives you time to adjust, rethink, and protect your future. Retirement doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be intentional. And if this feels familiar, it means you're already paying attention, which puts you ahead of many others. One of the hardest truths about retirement money is that mistakes rarely show themselves right away. They take time. They blend into daily life. They hide behind routines and good intentions. And by the time they become visible, they've usually been compounding for years. This is why so many retirees say the same thing looking back. They say, "I wish someone had told me earlier," because earlier is where retirement money decisions matter most. A common experience shared by many retirees is the realization that small financial stress doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives quietly. It shows up as hesitation before spending. It shows up as a little worry before checking account balances. It shows up as second-guessing plans that once felt simple, a weekend trip, a gift for a grandchild, a home repair that suddenly feels heavier than it should. These moments don't scream crisis, but they signal that something underneath is shifting. One retiree explained that at first he brushed off these feelings. He told himself he was just being cautious. But over time, the caution turned into avoidance, and the avoidance turned into anxiety. He wasn't broke, he wasn't struggling, but he wasn't free either. And that's when he realized that retirement isn't just about having money, it's about having confidence in how long that money will last. This is where the compounding effect of quiet mistakes becomes clear.
underestimating longevity, relying too much on fixed income, unplanned generosity, unchanged spending habits, and financial avoidance don't exist separately. They interact, they amplify each other. Each one makes the next more damaging, and together they slowly erode the sense of safety people expect retirement to bring.
Another retiree shared how small recurring expenses, subscriptions, memberships, automatic renewals stayed in place simply because they were familiar. Individually, they felt harmless, but together they created a steady drain on her finances. The danger is that these habits don't feel irresponsible. They feel comfortable. Retirement spending needs awareness, not fear. What worked at 50 may not work at 70. Small adjustments early prevent painful cuts later, yet many people delay this reflection until they're forced into it. The fifth mistake begins quietly and often feels like relief, avoiding financial conversations altogether. After decades of responsibility, many retirees feel tired of thinking about money. They want peace, not paperwork. One woman shared that after retiring, she stopped opening financial statements because they made her anxious. She assumed everything was fine because nothing felt wrong at first, but years passed and small issues went unnoticed. Fees, inefficient accounts, missed opportunities. The longer she avoided looking, the harder it felt to start again. Another retiree admitted he didn't want to face the possibility that changes were needed, so he chose avoidance instead. But retirement doesn't remove the need for financial attention. It changes its nature. Avoiding money doesn't create peace. It delays discomfort until it becomes unavoidable. The common thread in all these mistakes is silence. They don't arrive with warnings. They grow slowly, politely, quietly, until one day the consequences feel loud and overwhelming. But awareness changes everything. Recognizing these patterns early gives you time to adjust, rethink, and protect your future. Retirement doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be intentional. And if this feels familiar, it means you're already paying attention, which puts you ahead of many others. One of the hardest truths about retirement money is that mistakes rarely show themselves right away. They take time. They blend into daily life. They hide behind routines and good intentions. And by the time they become visible, they've usually been compounding for years. This is why so many retirees say the same thing looking back. They say, "I wish someone had told me earlier," because earlier is where retirement money decisions matter most. A common experience shared by many retirees is the realization that small financial stress doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives quietly. It shows up as hesitation before spending. It shows up as a little worry before checking account balances. It shows up as second-guessing plans that once felt simple: a weekend trip, a gift for a grandchild, a home repair that suddenly feels heavier than it should. These moments don't scream crisis, but they signal that something underneath is shifting. One retiree explained that at first he brushed off these feelings. He told himself he was just being cautious. But over time, the caution turned into avoidance, and the avoidance turned into anxiety. He wasn't broke, he wasn't struggling, but he wasn't free either. And that's when he realized that retirement isn't just about having money. It's about having confidence in how long that money will last. This is where the compounding effect of quiet mistakes becomes clear. Underestimating longevity, relying too much on fixed income, unplanned generosity, unchanged spending habits, and financial avoidance don't exist separately. They interact, they amplify each other. Each one makes the next more damaging, and together they slowly erode the sense of safety people expect retirement to bring. Another retiree shared how her early retirement years felt carefree. She traveled, helped family, and didn't worry much about tracking expenses. Everything seemed fine because nothing had gone wrong yet. But when healthcare costs increased and inflation began to squeeze her budget, she realized she had already used up the flexibility she needed to adapt. The problem wasn't the costs themselves. It was that her earlier decisions left her with fewer options. Options are the real currency of retirement.
The ability to adjust, slow down, speed up, or change direction financially gives peace of mind. Without options, every decision feels heavier, and every unexpected expense feels threatening. Many retirees don't lose money all at once. They lose options slowly. One of the most overlooked aspects of retirement planning is emotional spending, not in the dramatic sense, but emotional in the quiet, human sense. Spending to maintain identity, spending to preserve normalcy, spending to avoid feeling different from who you were before retirement. Many retirees admit they kept spending patterns not because they needed to, but because it helped them feel the same as before, the same person with the same life. One man shared that after retiring, he continued eating out frequently, not because he couldn't cook, but because it reminded him of his working life, his routines, his sense of independence. Over time, this habit became less about food and more about holding on to identity. When he eventually cut back, it felt like a loss, not a choice, which made it harder than it needed to be. Retirement brings emotional transitions that money often absorbs without us realizing it. And when those emotional costs aren't acknowledged, they quietly add pressure to finances that were never meant to carry that weight. Another quiet issue many retirees face is delayed course correction. People notice the signs but hesitate to act because change feels uncomfortable. Adjusting spending, reviewing investments, asking for advice, or setting boundaries with family all feel easier to postpone than to face. And postponement feels harmless in the moment, but time magnifies its cost. One retiree shared that she noticed her expenses creeping up, but told herself she would deal with it next year. Next year turned into 3 years, and by the time she sat down to reassess her finances, the changes required felt much more painful than if she had acted earlier. The adjustments weren't impossible, but they felt heavier because they came later. This is why early awareness matters so much. Retirement doesn't punish small mistakes immediately. It charges interest on them over time. Another pattern that emerges often is misplaced confidence. Many retirees feel that because they successfully managed money for decades, they'll naturally manage it well in retirement. But retirement is a different financial environment. Income behaves differently, risks behave differently, time behaves differently. Skills that worked during accumulation don't always translate perfectly to decumulation. One former business owner shared that he was excellent at building wealth, but struggled when it came time to spend it wisely. He either spent too cautiously or too freely because he hadn't practiced balance. His mistake wasn't lack of intelligence, it was unfamiliarity with a new phase. Retirement requires a mindset shift from growth to sustainability, from earning to preserving, from expansion to balance. And without consciously making that shift, people often operate on autopilot, using old rules in a new environment. There is also the quiet impact of isolation in financial decision-making. Many retirees stop discussing money openly, either because they feel they should already know what they're doing or because they don't want to worry others. This silence removes valuable perspective. One woman shared that she didn't talk about money with friends because it felt personal and she didn't want to seem ungrateful. Only later did she realize that many of her peers were facing the same uncertainties. Had she spoken sooner, she might have adjusted earlier. Retirement money mistakes thrive in isolation because isolation removes comparison, feedback, and reassurance. When people feel alone in their decisions, they're more likely to avoid them altogether.
Another subtle issue is the belief that cutting back equals failure. Many retirees resist adjusting lifestyles because it feels like admitting they planned poorly. But adjustment is not failure, it's adaptation, and adaptation is a strength, not a weakness. One retiree described how freeing it felt once he reframed adjustments as choices rather than losses.
Downsizing travel frequency, simplifying routines, he realized that many changes improved his quality of life instead of reducing it. But he wouldn't have discovered that if he had waited until he felt forced. The truth is, retirement doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for responsiveness, the ability to notice, shift, and respond calmly rather than react under pressure. Many retirees who eventually find peace say the same thing. Once they faced their finances honestly, the fear reduced, clarity replaced anxiety, even when changes were needed. Knowing where they stood felt better than guessing. Retirement money stress is often less about numbers and more about uncertainty, and uncertainty grows when avoided. Another overlooked factor is timing. When adjustments are made early, they feel small. When made late, they feel drastic. The same decision can feel gentle or painful depending entirely on when it's made. One man explained that cutting 10% from discretionary spending in his early retirement barely changed his lifestyle, but doing the same thing later felt restrictive because flexibility had already been used up. Time determines how forgiving adjustments feel. This is why so many retirees urge those approaching retirement to pay attention early, not out of fear, but out of kindness to their future selves. Money in retirement is not just a resource, it's a tool that supports peace, dignity, and choice. And like any tool, it works best when handled intentionally. For many retirees, the moment of change doesn't come from panic. It comes from a quiet realization, a feeling that something needs attention before it becomes a problem. Those who regain confidence often describe the same shift. They stopped trying to predict everything and started focusing on clarity instead. Clarity doesn't mean certainty. It means understanding where you are, what you have, and how flexible your situation really is. One retiree shared that the first thing he did was simply lay everything out, not to judge, not to panic, just to see his income, his expenses, his savings, and his time horizon. Seeing it clearly removed much of the anxiety because uncertainty had been filling in the gaps with fear. Once the numbers were visible, they felt manageable. Another woman explained that she stopped thinking in terms of forever and started thinking in seasons instead. She reviewed her finances annually rather than assuming one plan would last decades. This mindset allowed her to adapt without feeling like she had failed. One of the most powerful changes retirees make is shifting from rigid plans to flexible frameworks. Instead of asking, "Will this last forever?" they ask, "Does this work for now, and what would I change if circumstances shift?" This small change in thinking restores a sense of control. Many retirees also describe the relief that comes from redefining what enough means. During working years, enough often keeps moving. Retirement offers the chance to let it settle, but only if expectations are consciously adjusted. One man shared that once he stopped comparing his retirement lifestyle to his peak earning years, he felt lighter. His spending aligned more closely with what actually brought him joy, not what used to signal success. This alignment between values and spending reduces financial pressure without requiring sacrifice. It's not about cutting joy, it's about removing expenses that don't add peace.
Another key practice is building intentional buffers, not emergency funds in the traditional sense, but flexibility buffers, room to adjust spending, timing, or plans without stress. Retirees who maintain even small buffers describe feeling safer than those with higher incomes but no flexibility. One woman shared that keeping a modest cash reserve gave her confidence to handle surprises without fear. She didn't use it often, but knowing it was there changed how she experienced daily life. Another retiree explained that flexibility also came from having layered income, not necessarily more income, but income that behaved differently, some steady, some adaptable, some optional. This mix gave him options when costs changed.
Retirees who recovered from early mistakes often say they stopped seeking perfection and started prioritizing resilience. The ability to absorb change mattered more than maximizing returns. One of the quiet breakthroughs many experience is learning to say no without guilt, especially when it comes to helping others financially. This doesn't mean becoming selfish, it means becoming sustainable. One woman shared that after setting clear boundaries with family, she felt closer to them, not farther apart. The honesty reduced unspoken tension and protected her future security. Another retiree said his explaining his limits early prevented resentment later, both for himself and for those he loved. Financial clarity also changes how retirees experience aging itself. When money feels manageable, health decisions feel less stressful, living arrangements feel more flexible, and future planning feels less intimidating. Many retirees describe how money anxiety magnified health worries before they addressed it. Once finances felt clearer, those same health concerns felt more manageable. Another practice that helped many was normalizing ongoing financial attention, not as work, but as care. Just as health requires checkups, finances benefit from gentle, regular review. One retiree compared it to tending a garden. Small, consistent care prevented bigger problems later and removed the fear of neglect. Those who thrive in retirement often stop viewing financial adjustments as losses and start seeing them as refinements. They refine routines, spending habits, and expectations until life feels balanced again. One man shared that simplifying his lifestyle didn't make it smaller, it made it calmer. He spent less time worrying and more time enjoying ordinary moments. Another retiree found that reducing commitments freed both time and money, creating space for deeper relationships and personal fulfillment. The retirees who regain peace consistently mention self-compassion. They forgive earlier mistakes. They accept that planning perfectly for decades of life is unrealistic, and they focus on what they can influence now. One woman shared that letting go of regret was just as important as adjusting her finances. Once she stopped blaming herself, she could move forward with clarity. Retirement is not a test you either pass or fail. It's a long, evolving chapter that asks for patience, awareness, and kindness toward yourself.
Another important shift is redefining success. Success in retirement is not about maximizing wealth. It's about minimizing worry, maximizing freedom, and maintaining dignity. Retirees who internalize this feel less pressure to keep up appearances and more permission to live authentically. Money becomes a tool rather than a scorecard, and that change alone relieves enormous stress. Many also describe the benefit of gentle guidance, not dramatic overhauls, but informed conversations with trusted advisors, friends, or family. Perspectives that ground decisions rather than overwhelm them. Retirement planning doesn't end when work ends. It simply changes focus from building to sustaining and enjoying. Those who adapt early often say they wish they had worried less and paid attention sooner, not to avoid mistakes entirely, but to catch them before they compounded. By the time many retirees reach this point of awareness, something important has already shifted. They no longer see retirement as a fixed destination. They see it as a living, breathing phase that responds to attention, care, and intention. This shift alone changes how money feels, how decisions feel, and how the future feels. The people who find peace in retirement are rarely the ones who made no mistakes. They are the ones who noticed them early, accepted them honestly, and adjusted gently without panic. Retirement doesn't reward denial, but it also doesn't punish imperfection. It responds best to awareness.
One retiree shared that once he stopped avoiding his finances and started engaging them with calmly, his fear decreased, even though nothing dramatic changed. The numbers stayed mostly the same, but his relationship with them improved, and that changed everything. Another woman explained that the moment she accepted that retirement required ongoing participation, not passive hope, she felt empowered rather than overwhelmed. She wasn't chasing control, she was cultivating understanding. This is one of the most important truths about retirement. Money confidence doesn't come from having more. It comes from knowing what you have and how long it can reasonably support your life. When retirees stop measuring success by balance size and start measuring it by peace, stability, and flexibility, financial decisions become clearer, simpler, and less emotional. Many people assume the goal of retirement planning is to never touch principal. But retirees who thrive often let go of that rule and replace it with sustainability. They focus on making money serve life rather than preserving money at the expense of living. One man shared that once he allowed himself to use his savings intentionally rather than fearfully, his stress dropped and his enjoyment increased because the money finally had a purpose beyond existing.
Another retiree said that giving herself permission to adjust plans without guilt was the moment retirement started to feel like freedom rather than obligation. The quiet money mistakes that ruin retirement don't do so because people are careless. They do so because people are human, optimistic, generous, habitual, and sometimes tired. These traits are not flaws. They simply need guidance. Retirement works best when generosity is balanced with boundaries, optimism is paired with realism, and comfort is supported by awareness. Small habits matter more than dramatic changes. Reviewing expenses periodically, staying curious about options, having honest conversations, and being willing to adjust gradually, these are the practices that protect retirement quietly over time. One retiree described it as steering rather than rowing. He didn't push harder, he simply made small course corrections that kept him on track. This approach reduces stress because it removes urgency. Decisions don't feel like emergencies, they feel like choices. Another important realization many retirees share is that comparison is the fastest way to erode contentment. Everyone retires differently, with different resources, health, and priorities. Measuring your retirement against someone else's only creates unnecessary pressure. Those who let go of comparison and focus inward report greater satisfaction, regardless of income level. Retirement is deeply personal, and money should support that individuality, not constrain it. One woman shared that simplifying her life financially allowed her to deepen relationships and routines that mattered most. Her world became smaller, but richer. Another retiree found joy in slower rhythms, less consumption, and more presence once he stopped chasing the version of retirement he thought he should have. The final protection against quiet financial erosion is intentional reflection, taking time occasionally to ask simple questions. Am I still comfortable? Do I feel secure? Do my spending choices reflect what matters to me now? These questions don't require spreadsheets, they require honesty and attention. Retirement doesn't demand constant vigilance, it asks for gentle stewardship, a willingness to notice, respond, and care. For those approaching retirement, this awareness is a gift. You don't need to be perfect, you only need to stay engaged. For those already retired, it's never too late to adjust. Small, thoughtful changes can restore confidence and calm at any stage. The mistakes that quietly ruin retirement lose their power once they're named, understood, and addressed. Retirement can still be a season of peace, dignity, and meaning, not because nothing goes wrong, but because you know how to respond when it does. If this message resonated with you, it means you're already doing something right. You're paying attention, and that alone changes outcomes.
Retirement is not about avoiding every mistake. It's about creating a life that remains livable, flexible, and calm through change. This chapter is not about fear, it's about awareness, and awareness is the foundation of lasting peace. Thank you for being here and for taking the time to reflect on what truly protects retirement in the quiet, everyday moments.